Hello everyone, welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav, which Mirz Hashem we will be concluding later this week. In this share we will be learning Mirz Hashem Daf Kuf Samach Aleph Amid Beis. We pick up on Kuf Samach Aleph Amid Aleph. We're continuing to learn Hilchos Megillah. We are in Siman Tov Reish Tzadikei in the middle of the Ramah of Sif Beis. So we pick up Kuf Samach Aleph Amid Aleph, 4 lines from the bottom, about a third of the way through the line. Says the Ramah, Ve'ein lehisanois bepurim, we may not fast on Purim, melavad tainus chaloim, with the exception of somebody who has a need to fast a tainus chaloim. Of course, a tainus chaloim is a tainus that somebody has to be mevatel, to nullify a very disturbing dream, and the Ramah says, "Va'ayin la'el simin tavkuf samachei tavkuf samaches sifhei v'simin tavkuf ayin." Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Vav. The Levad Tainus Chaloim. Now, what does somebody do if he does have the need to fast a Tainus Chaloim on Purim? Well, we know that if somebody has the need to fast a Tainus Chaloim on Shabbos, he fasts on Shabbos, and he fasts for the entire day of Shabbos. At another point in time, he has to fast a tainus to get kapara for the fact that he fasted on Shabbos. But he does fast the entire Shabbos. Not so on Purim. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Vav, B'levad tainus chaloim, v'yisana ad achar mincha. In such a case, a person should fast until after mincha on Purim day. V'yoichal koydem bias hashemesh, but then he should make sure to eat before nightfall, before Shkia. Rak pam achas, but he should only eat one time. The reason for this is because in the Megillah itself, it calls Purim Yemei Mishte V'Simcha. So there is a requirement to eat at least something on Purim. So even though he's fasting at Tainus Chaloim, no matter. He has to break his fast and he has to eat at some point before nightfall, but he should only eat pam achas. If somebody makes a shvuah to fast on Purim, he has to take care to go to a chacham and make hatara. He has to be released from that shvuah. The Ramah told us Sifhei. That's a reference to Sifhei, and it is over there. Yeah, it's the Mishnah Berurah says over there that the person who does fast this Tainus Chaloim on Purim, if he fasts the entire day, then he has to fast another day for the fact that he fasted on Purim. But if he does as instructed by the Ramah here, if he breaks his fast and he is Mekayim Yemei Mishte V'Simcha, then he does not. Continues the Chavetz Chaim, Ubesimin Tavkuf Ayin B'chol HaSimin. Tavkuf Ayin is a siman that's dedicated to the halachas of somebody who makes a neder to fast a series of days, and either Rosh Chodesh or Chanukah or Purim or another Yom Tov falls out on the calendar during that series of Tanesim. How is he supposed to comport himself? It depends on exactly what his neder was, and we can take a look over there in Siman Tavkuf Ayin for those halachas. No, we're not up to that yet. Okay, let's go back to the Ramah. 3 lines from the bottom near the beginning of the line. Yesh shenagu lilbaish bigdei Shabbos v'yom tov b'Purim. There are those that have the minig to wear bigdei Shabbos and bigdei Yom Tov on Purim. It's a Yom Tov v'chein nachain, and that indeed would be proper. Continues the Ramah. V'nayhagem lasois sudas Purim la'achar mincha. Our minig is to make the Purim Suda after Mincha on Purim day, the Arvis Yispalalu Balayla, and then we daven Ma'ariv later at night. I'm a little puzzled by what the Ramah is adding by those 3 words, the Arvis Yispalalu Balayla. We'll see if I can find something. Umispalalim Mincha Tchila Ba'id Hayom Gadol. Since we're going to have the Purim Suda after Mincha, we should daven Mincha early. So somebody, let's say, usually davens mincha 20 minutes before Shkia, that's not when he should daven mincha Purim day. Purim Day, we strive to daven Mincha early so that we could then have the Sudas Purim after Mincha, and we have plenty of time to have the Purim Suda. So, like the Ramah says now, V'roiv HaSuda tzricha lihiyos bayom, so that the majority of the Purim Suda will take place on Purim Day. V'loi k'moshe na'agin lahaschel samach la'erev, not like those who have the minig to begin the Purim Suda very late in the day, V'ikar Suda Hilel Tesvav, so that the Ikar of the Purim Suda is actually not taking place on Yud Daled, it's actually taking place on Tesvav Adar. That the Ramah doesn't like. So, what does the Ramah say here? The Ramah says the minig is to begin the Purim Suda after davening Mincha. And the Mishnah Berurah is going to explain why. Since we're going to begin the Purim Suda after we daven Mincha, we should be makbid to daven Mincha early. Why? Because we want to have plenty of time so that Roiv of the Suda should take place on Yud Daled, not on Tesvav. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Ches, La'achar Mincha. We begin the Purim Suda after Mincha. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ha deloi nihigi la'asoisa b'shachris. What's the reason? Why is it that we just don't make the Purim Suda b'shachris? What's the problem? Go to shul, daven. We already said that the minig is on Purim is supposed to daven early. So, okay, daven v'sikin, have here Megillah, come home, make a Purim Suda. What are we waiting until after Mincha for? So the Chavetz Chaim explains, Ha deloi nihigi la'asoisa b'shachris, this that we're not noyig to make the Purim Suda in the morning, mishum shetrudim b'bishlayach manas, because we have other mitzvahs hayoim that we need to do. We have to do b'shlayach manas, we have to do matanas le'evyonim, and the minig is that we begin these things right away in the morning. A lot of people bring mishlayach manas with them to shul. That's when they're going to see certain people. So right away after davening, they're busy giving out mishlayach manas. So it's not practicable to really begin the Suda in the morning for a lot of people. And therefore, Mishum Shetrudin B'Mishlach Manas, V'nimshachin B'roiv Ad HaMincha. And very often, this takes up time all the way until the Zman of Mincha. Let's say Mincha Gedolah. V'asurin Lahaskil B'Suda Kaidem Mincha. And then, once the Zman of Mincha comes, we run into a problem. Now that it's the Zman of Mincha, we don't want to make a Sudas Kva. We don't want to sit down to a Suda, which is certainly a Sudas Kva. We're going to wash and everything else. We don't want to sit down to a Suda before we daven Mincha, especially on Purim, with his Chayiv Inish Livsume Bepurye. You're going to go ahead and you're going to indulge in drink. How are you going to daven Mincha? You have to be Roy Lamed L'ftei HaMelech, and there's even a risk somebody might chas v'chalila forget to daven Mincha, b'toich shikrusai, b'toich the simcha of Sudas Purim. So therefore, we're busy with Mishlayach Manas until the Zman of Mincha. Once the Zman of Mincha comes, we can no longer start the Suda without davening Mincha first. So we're going to daven Mincha first, then begin the Suda, and therefore, now we get up to Ois Katan Tes, Ba'oid Gadol. We should see to it to daven Mincha early so that we have plenty of time in order to go ahead and have the Purim Suda. Now, there's various reasons why we should want to make the Purim Suda early, to make it Peshachris. First of all, we know there's always a rule, Zriz and Makdimin. The Purim Suda is one of the mitzvahs hayom, so why should we push it off to later? Another reason is because the Suda that Esther made for Haman and Achashverosh, and Haman was hung right after that Suda that's brought down took place in the morning. So there are reasons why we should want to make the Purim Suda in the morning. The Chavetz Chaim is pointing out that it's not practicable, at least for most people, and that's why we do it later. But here a nice test says the Chavetz Chaim, Kasav Eliyah Rabbah b'shem Shla. The Eliyah Rabbah brings down in the name of the Shla that Ha-Meshubach, somebody who's praiseworthy. Who is that? Mi she'oisa Suda b'shachris. The Shla says a praiseworthy person, Taka makes the Purim Suda in the morning. The Kasavite, and he writes further, Sheyekabetz anshe beisai v'chaverov, that when you make the Purim Suda, you should invite your family members, you should invite your friends to the Purim Suda. Why? because it's not possible to have a properly simchadika Purim Suda alone. You should invite company and celebrate with people. However, warns the Chavetz Chaim, we have to be careful what type of simcha the Purim Suda becomes. The Kaf HaChaim brings down that we should take great care that the Purim Suda should not turn into silliness and kalos roish and inappropriateness due to drink. Kaf HaChaim even says that if by inviting company you're going to risk that the Purim Suda is going to become inappropriate, don't invite company. Better have the Suda's Purim alone. So the Purim Suda is supposed to be besimcha, but it has to be a simcha shel divrei Torah, like we're going to see shortly. Okay, continues the Ramah back on Kuf Samach Aleph Amud Aleph. Last word of the page. Ukeshachal Purim b'yom shishi. When Purim falls out on Erev Shabbos, Yasu Asuda b'shachris. Then you should make the Purim Suda in the morning, Mishum Kvayit Shabbos, because we have to worry about Kavod Shabbos. Usually on Erev Shabbos, we don't make a Suda late in the day. Why? Because we want to come to the Shabbos Suda Friday night, b'teyavayin. We want to have an appetite. Otherwise, it's not Kavod Shabbos. If we're going to come to the Shabbos Suda and we're going to be full, that's not appropriate. That's not Kavod Shabbos. So, says the Ramah, if Purim falls out on Erev Shabbos, then you should make the Purim Suda Friday morning. Continues the Ramah. The Ramah says, notwithstanding the fact that I just told you earlier, the Ramah himself said that the minig is to make the Suda after Mincha, but over here the Ramah says, certainly, if you want to make the Purim Suda in the morning every year, even when Purim is not an Erev Shabbos, you certainly may do so. We said there's even reasons that it's better to do that. Ois Katan Yud in the Mishnah Berurah, Hasuda b'Shachris, Hainu Kaidem Chatzos Hayom Lechatchila, before Chatzos. V'ayin, on Erev Shabbos, you make the Suda before Chatzos Lechatchila. V'ayin b'Yad Ephraim Asher Kosav b'Shem Maharil. Okay. Let me just see quickly. Yeah, if you take a look at Dirshu footnote number 23, what is the Chavetz Chaim referring to here when he speaks about Yad Ephraim? He says, really, even though the Mishnah Berurah is saying over here that Lechatchila, when Purim is Erev Shabbos, you should make the Suda before Chatzos, says over here, even Lechatchila, you could do it all the way till the 10th hour of the day. That's like 2 hours before Shkia. V'im nimsheka Sudasai ado Erev, and if the Purim Suda drags on all the way later, after Shkia, Kasav HaShulchan Aruch Le'el, the Shulchan Aruch wrote in Siman Reish Ayin Aleph of the Mishnah Berurah Sham, Shetzarach lahafsek achilosai b'bein hashmoshes. If you're in the middle of your Purim Suda on Erev Shabbos and you get to Shkia, you have to stop eating. And then what do? V'lifreis mapa ala pas, take a cover and put it over the chalas, or kadesh, and then make kiddush, and then you could go weiter with your Suda. Okay. Says the Ramah weiter, second line down. Yesh Oimrim, there are those that say, Sheyesh lechal machal zer oinim bepurim. There are those that say that there's an inyan to eat seeds on Purim. Zecher lezer oinim she'achal Daniel v'chaverov bebavel. And this is a zecher to Daniel, Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi, the Nevi'im at the time, that when they were in Bavel, they ate zer oinim. They ate seeds. What's the backstory to that? The backstory is that they were members of Nebuchadnezzar's court, and they're in Bavel, and they didn't have kosher food. So they subsisted on zeroinim. That's what they subsisted on. They became vegans. Incidentally, this, I believe, is the source for the poppy seed hamantash. Everybody wonders, where did the poppy seed hamantash come from? Mun, where did that come from? Well, this is the source because there was a minhag to eat zer oinim as a remembrance to Daniel and his compatriots who subsisted on a diet of zer oinim in Bavel. Says the Mishnah Berurah, cut Yod Aleph Bachal zer oinim. The Mishnah Berurah brings down over here from the Magen Avram that this is a minhag for the Suda that people make Purim night. That's when they should eat zer oinim. I don't know why it's specific to Purim night, unless the reason it's maybe the reason it's distinctly for Purim night, specifically for Purim night. If you take a look at the Sharetzion over here, Ois Kat Yud Beis, he brings it down for the Magen Avram, and then he says, Oid Kasav B'Shem Kolboi, he brings down from the Kolboi, Yesh She'ein Oichlin Basar Balayla, there are those who did not eat basar, they didn't eat meat, Purim night, Kedei Shelo Yitu Shehu Sudas Purim. They didn't want to make too fancy of a Suda by Purim night, so they didn't have meat, lest people make a mistake and think that that's the Purim Suda. And we already learned earlier that you cannot be Yotze, the Purim Suda, Purim by night, because the Megillah says, Yemei Mishnah V'Simcha. Purim is, they're supposed to be days, not nights, of Mishnah V'Simcha, so you have to have the Suda's Purim by day, not by night. So, there are those that had the minhag, no meat. You don't make too fancy a Suda Purim by night, lest people think that that's the Suda's Purim. V'inyan kazeh talui lefi minhag hamakom, and the Sharetzion says that would be talui on the minhag hamakom. But I was thinking, maybe that's why it became a minhag to have zer oinim, to have seeds by night. We don't want to have too rich, too fancy a Suda by night, so we left out the meat, and instead we said, you know what, we could accomplish something else by the night Suda, and that is we could make a commemoration for Daniel, and we're going to see also for Esther Amalka, and we can eat zer oinim. Now you're going to ask me, what, you're going to make a Suda on seeds? Well, they bring down from the Divrei Yatziv, from Klosterberger Rebbe, Zechat Tzadik Kodesh Levracha, that zer oinim over here does not only mean seeds, it means vegetables. It means any kind of vegetables. So it's really, you can make a beautiful vegetable soup, you can make a milcha kikish, you can make, I don't know, there's all sorts of stuff that you can make with vegetables. So maybe that's why the minhag of the zer oinim became at night, not by day. By day already, you're having a rich Suda, you're having meat, you're having everything else. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Yud Beis, Daniel v'chaverov, v'gam Esther akla zer oinim. We also find that Esther Amalka ate zer oinim, kida armina parakama de Megillah, like we learned in Daf Yomi not all that long ago, Megillah Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, that the pasuk says, vayishaneha v'esther roiseha l'toiv beis hanoshim, that Haggai made changes in the care of Esther Amalka. And the Chazal bring down, one of the changes was shehe'echila zer oinin, that he gave her zer oinin. Again, she had a kashrus problem. So how is she going to be able to manage with kashrus? He gave her zer oinin. He put her on a vegan diet. Says the Rama weiter. 3 lines down, middle of the line. Now, they do ask the kasha, I wonder if the Dirshu has a footnote on it, if there's room here to eat zer oinim as a zecher to Esther Amalka, so why does the Ramah say that we should eat zer oinim as a zecher to Daniel? Now, I know that they say that it makes sense to make a zecher to Daniel on Purim, because in the Megillah it says, Vayavai hasach, and the Chazal bring down that the sach was Daniel. So Daniel has a shaykhis to the Megillah. But again, if you have a choice between making a commemoration for Daniel or making a commemoration for Esther Hamalka, why doesn't the Rama mention Esther Hamalka? Nope, I don't see anything here in the Dirshu. I thought that the Dirshu might say something. Let me just take a quick look. This is Ois Cotton Yud Beis. I see brought down from the Big Day Yesha. The Big Day Yesha asks this question. And the answer that he gives is, if we're going to do something as a zecher, we want to have a zecher to additional nisim. We're already commemorating the nes of Purim in abundant fashion. That we have. But we want to add a new zecher to a new nes. And that is the nes that Daniel, Mishael, Azariah, that they were able to subsist on a meager diet of Zerainim. So now we have the opportunity to make a zecher to an additional nes. Okay. Weiter in the Ramah. 3 lines down, middle of the line. Says the Ramah, Toiv la'asoik ma'at ba'Torah kaidem sheyaschel hasuda. The Ramah says it certainly would be good to be Isaac at least a little bit in Torah before you begin the Purim Suda. I remember very fondly the years that I was saying in Daf Yomi share. I said Daf Yomi, I think right after the Vesikin Minyan. So we had the Vesikin Minyan, and then right away we sat down to learn the Daf. I always tried to make the Daf a little bit interesting, special for Purim, but we did a Daf share right away after davening. So Toiv Lasik Ma'at B'Torah Kodim Sheyaschel HaSuda. Before you get busy with the Purim Suda, certainly you should spend some time learning Torah. The Smach L'Davar, and the Ramah says there's a good remez to that, because the pasuk in the Megillah says, La Yehuda Ma'isa Oira V'Simcha, V'Darshinan Oira Zu Torah. We always say, what's light? Oira Zu Torah. Says the Ramah weiter, V'chayev b'mishte v'simcha k'tzas b'shnei yamim yodalid v'tesvav. We're obligated to have a certain amount of mishte and simcha, both on yodalid and tesvav. Even if we live in an open city, we should be mesameach k'tzas. And it sounds like mishte k'tzas on tesvav as well. V'chei nagu, and that is the minig. V'yesh umrim, there are those that say, says the Ramah, de'mehizik echad es chaveroi. If somebody caused some damage to his friend, mikayach simchas Purim, out of being misameach on Purim, poter milushalem, he is exempt from making payment. V'ayin b'choshe mishpat bedine nezikin. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut in Yud Gimel. De'mehizik, bebach mechalik ben hezek gadol katan. The Bach differentiates between a significant hezek and a minor hezek, bein beguf, bein mamaman, whether the hezek is a hezek to a person physically or monetarily. The behezek gadol makpidin, that there is a hakpada on a hezek gadol. If somebody does significant damage to somebody else, there's no ptur. Vein minig liftar behezek gadol. There's no minig to overlook a hezek gadol. We're talking about a damage that happens out of the simcha. Somebody's dancing out of control. But certainly if somebody has intent to cause damage to somebody, then certainly he is chayiv. So we are up to Sif Gimel in the Mechaber, 4 lines up from the bottom, middle of the line. Says the Mechaber, Omer al Hanisim beberkas hamazain beberkas haaretz. On Purim, we recite al Hanisim in benching, and we insert it into berkas haaretz. That's the bracha that begins with Noidalacha and closes out Baruch Atah Hashem al haaretz v'al hamazain. So we place al Hanisim between the paragraph of Noidalacha and Va'al Hakoil. Ve'im hischil seudasai bayom. This is something that happens in many households by the Purim Suda. If you begin the Purim Suda during the day, umashcha ad halayla, and the Purim Suda continues into the night, Omer al Hanisim, when you bench, you do say al Hanisim in benching, even though you're going to be benching already on Tesvav. Why is it that you still say al Hanisim? Debasar tchilas seuda azlinan, because in determining whether or not you should say al Hanisim, we go by the time of the beginning of the Suda, not the time of the benching. However, the Mechaber does bring down another shita, the shita of the Rosh. V'yesh mi she'omer she'ein lo amroi. There are those that say that you do not say al hanisim if you conclude the Suda by night already on Tesvav. However, the Ramah says v'nai hagen kisvara rishona. Our minig is to follow the first opinion, which is the opinion of Hagos HaMaimoni. Okay, let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Ois Katan Tesvav. Omer al Hanisim bebirkas hamazayin. We say al Hanisim in benching. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ve'im shachach loimer al Hanisim. If somebody forgot to say al Hanisim in benching, yesh oimrim demachzirin oisai. There are those that say that you have to go back and you have to repeat benching. Ve'yesh oimrim de'ein machzirin oisai. And there are those that disagree and say, no, you do not have to repeat benching. And the Mishnah Berurah concludes, Usafik brachas lahakal, since we always have the rule, a bracha is a derabanan, so we always have the rule of Safik brachas lahakal. We always make and we don't repeat a bracha whenever there is a suffix. Now, what's behind this machlokes? Well, we know usually the rule, how we determine whether or not you have to repeat benching if you left out me'ein hama'ura, if you left out the mention of something that happened on that day. So let's say Shabbos, if you left out Ritzei. Shabbos, if you leave out Ritzei, you have to bench again. Why? Because Shabbos requires a Suda. So since the Suda is a requirement of the day, if you left out Ritzei, if you left out the mention of the day, you have to go ahead and you have to repeat benching. Well, there are those that reason, and this would be the shita of the let's see, the Sharatziyana brings this down from the Marshal, the Matei Moshe, the Shla, that on Purim there is a chiyuv of a Suda, Yemei Mishta v'Simcha. So since you have to make a Purim Suda, if you leave out Al Hanisim, you have to repeat benching. However, the ones who disagree, that's brought down here, Del Yozuta b'Shem Maharal mi Prague v'Gam Magen Avram Soivikein Meikaradin. It says in the Sharitzion, there are those that say that you don't have to go back. Why? Well, one reason that they bring down is that while it's true that Purim is Yemei Mishta v'Simcha, and you have to have a Sudas Purim, it's not brought down that you must have Pas. And since it's not brought down that you must have Pas, that means you don't have to wash. And if you don't have to wash, you don't have to bench. So strictly speaking, and I think there might be a machlokes achronim over here, whether or not you have to have Pas, where the ones that say that you don't have to repeat benching hold that me'ikar hadin, you don't necessarily have to have a Suda with Pas on Purim, and therefore Sudas Purim doesn't really require benching. While those that say that you do have to repeat benching if you leave out Al Hanisim hold that there is a chiyuv of Suda with Pas. Having said that, continues the Mishnah Berurah. Second wide line down, middle of the line. V'dafka b'suda rishayna she'oichel bo b'yom. This whole question would only be germane to the first Suda that you eat, Purim by day. Aval b'suda shniya she'oichel achar ha'mincha she'karen Sudas Purim. Let's say you came home after Megillah lading in the morning, and you sat down and you had a bagel with scrambled eggs. So you already washed, you already benched. Technically, you already had a Sudas Purim. Now, after Mincha, you're having your official Purim Suda, and you're having guests and company and everything else. But in reality, you were already Mekayim Sudas Purim by the Suda that you had in the morning. Ukvar ochal Suda achas bayom. You already ate one Suda today. Shuv ein machzir noisel kuli alma. Now everybody would agree that you don't repeat benching, because whatever chiyuv you had of Sudas Purim, you were already mekayim it by breakfast. So now that we've determined that you don't repeat benching, but you did neglect to say Al Hanisim, what do? Ella rather, instead of repeating benching, says the Mishnah Berurah, kishamegia la harachamon, when you get up to the harachamons, yomer harachamon hu yasalonu nisim, you should add Alanisim into the benching at that point, B'derech Bakosha, and you should say, Harachaman, who Yasa Lanu Nisim, the Rabbeinu Shalom who's a Rachaman, should make Nisim for us, Kishasa Nisim Laveseinu, like the Nisim that you made for our forefathers in the days of Chanukah. Continues the Chavetz Chaim, Kishachal Purim Erev Shabbos, when Purim falls out on Erev Shabbos, Umashcha Su'udasai Ad Halayla. So let's say Purim is Erev Shabbos. You began your Sudas Purim at some point on Friday, and you went straight into Shabbos. You were Puris Mappa, and you made Kiddush, and then you went weiter with your Suda. And now it gets up to benching. Oh, what do you do now? Well, says the Mishnah Berurah, now you have a shtickle problem. On the one hand, Chayiv Lahaskir Shal Akshav, you have to mention Me'ein HaMa'ura of Shabbos, Dahainu Ritzei. Since it's Friday night, you have to say Ritzei in benching. Vim Kain, now if you're going to say Ritzei, that means that you are making a statement in your benching that it is now Shabbos. Now, Shabbos is not Purim. Purim was Erev Shabbos. Vim Kain, Eich Yomar Al Hanisim. So now how are you supposed to say Al Hanisim? Devatarti Desasri. If you were to say Al Hanisim now, your benching would be contradictory. Purim was Yom Shishi. Purim was Erev Shabbos. Now you're benching, you're saying Ritzei. That means today's Shabbos, not Yom Shishi. So Al Hanisim and Ritzei would be contradictory. In this scenario, says the Chavetz Chaim, since Al Hanisim is not such a tremendous chiyuv, it's only a minig, L'chein Yarmar Rak Shel Shabbos, therefore the Mishnah Berurah is machriah that you should only mention Ritzei and not Al Hanisim. V'chol zeh afilu kishalei hispal adayin. And this is if you didn't daven Ma'ariv yet. Ubeprat im hispal mikoidem bevadai ene kedai lahaskir achakach Al Hanisim b'berkas hamazon kudul kamei. So the Mishnah Berurah says, this that I'm telling you not to say Al Hanisim, because Al Hanisim would be a contradiction to Ritzei. That's true even if you didn't yet daven Friday night Ma'ariv. If you already daven Friday night Ma'ariv, certainly you cannot say Al Hanisim anymore because you davened a Shabbos davening. So it would be completely inappropriate to now say Al Hanisim, which only applies to Erev Shabbos and not to Shabbos. Okay, the Mechaber said that if you make your Purim Suda during the day and your Purim Suda goes into the night, when you bench, you say Al Hanisim. Ois katan tezayin, Omer Al Hanisim. Yesh Omrim dafke kishaloi hispal arvis adayin. There are those that say that this shita that holds that you do say Al Hanisim if you started the Purim Suda by day and you ended at night on Tezvav, that's only if you did not yet daven Ma'ariv. Avol mishe ispalel, but if you already daven Ma'ariv, so with your davening, you have already declared that it's the next day. Otherwise, had you daven Ma'ariv, Shuv Eina Omer Al Hanisim, then you would not say Al Hanisim. V'yesh Omrim, however, there are others that say the B'chol Gavni Omer, that even if you daven Ma'ariv, you still say Al Hanisim. Falkein, therefore, Ma'anochayin, the Chavetz Chaim says it would be proper. Sheyavarich Berkas Hamazayin Kaidim Sheyispal. You should see to it that you should bench before you daven Ma'ariv lahoitzi atzmai miplukta to get out of this problem. So again, you started your Purim Suda by day, and you're going to bench at night. So you're going to bench when it's already Tezvav. Don't daven Ma'ariv before you bench, because if you daven Ma'ariv before you bench, you're getting yourself involved in this machlokes of whether or not you could still say Al Hanisim despite the fact that you daven Ma'ariv. Certainly in your Ma'ariv, you're not going to say Al Hanisim. Now, what do you do if you're in the middle of your Purim Suda and it's already night, so it's already Tezvav, and they need a minyan in shul? If they want a minyan, and it's the middle of your Purim Suda, bench the Yomer Al Hanisim and say Al Hanisim, and then go to shul to daven, and you don't have to feel like, now they needed me for a minyan, I went to shul, I davened Ma'ariv, I benched because they needed me for Ma'ariv. So I benched, because otherwise I was going to have a shiloh what to do with benching. So I benched with Al Nisim. Now I go to shul, and now my Purim is over. I can't continue my Suda anymore. Says the Chavetz Chaim, no. Yelech lebeis hakneses lehispal. V'achakach, and afterwards, yochel lecha v'lishtois v'lusmayachayid. You could come home, and you could continue your Purim Suda. You're not going to bench anymore, because you're already benched. You're not going to say Al Nisim anymore, but you can still eat, and you can still drink, and you can still sing Shoshanas Yaakov. The HaMitzvah Nesimcha b'shtei yamim. Because we saw already in the Ramah that there's an Inyan to be Mesameach both days on Yudalad and Tesvav. He's cutting Yud Zayin. V'noyegi kisfar Rishayna. The Ramah said we are noyeg like the first opinion, who says that you do say Al Anisim even if you finish your Suda by night. Ubazeh imloy amaroi. But in that case, if you're benching already late at night and you forget to say Al Anisim, bavadai ein machzir noisai, then certainly you do not go back. Here you would have a double suffix. There's one shita that holds that whenever you start the Suda by day, you end the Suda by night, you don't say Al Anisim. Then there's another shaila, if you forget Al Anisim in benching, do you say benching over again or not? So certainly, if you're benching on Tesvav, right? You started your Purim Suda by day and you're ending it at night, so you're benching on Tesvav, and you forgot to say Al Anisim, you're certainly not going to repeat benching, and we'll stop over here with Sif Daled. Thank you so much for joining me for Liman HaTorah. The source of Liman HaTorah should be begging against Klal Yisrael. The Rabbanan Shalom should say Yeshua Sefor's Parnasa and Shidduchim to all those in need, and we should be zeichet to see the BS Tzedek B'mehera v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.